sports medicine physician, and today I'm reviewing Grey's Anatomy Best Moments of Season 1. Because, like, you guys have asked for it. Like, only a bazillion times. Dr. Chris, please react to a TV show. Okay, freaking here it is. I'm gonna react to a TV show.
Oh no! Oh yeah!
As I've said to you guys before, I don't really watch a lot of TV. I do watch a few shows and some sports, but really, I don't have much time to watch a lot of stuff. One of the type of shows that I really don't watch, and intentionally so, are medical dramas. Why? Well, because I find most of them to be unfreaking realistic. That's why I don't watch them. But, obviously, lots of people have been watching them. Dr. Mike, Dr. Hope, Sick Notes, and you guys have said, Dr. Chris, you should watch one. So I have finally broken down. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it today, and I've decided to do Grey's Anatomy. So I'm gonna watch the best moments of season 1. So for the first scene that we're gonna review, this is, I guess, it must be from the very first episode of Grey's Anatomy, and this scene is when the interns introduce themselves to their resident.
I thought the Nazi would be a Nazi. Maybe it's professional jealousy. Maybe she's brilliant and they call her Nazi because they're jealous. Hi, I'm Isabel Stevens, but everyone calls me Izzy.
Here she says she has 5 rules.
I have 5 rules, memorize them. Rule number 1, don't bother sucking up. I already hate you, that's not gonna change.
Don't suck up. That's true. Most people don't like to suck up. Sucking up is not really gonna get you anywhere because in the end, practicing medicine is about being knowledgeable, competent, and being diligent. And so no amount of sucking up is gonna do those things for you. You have to know how to treat particular problems or illnesses or injuries. You just need to know it. No amount of sucking up is gonna put that there for you.
Answer every page at a run. A run, that's rule number 2.
Rule number 2, answer all pages at a run. Well, yeah, that's true because you never know when a page is about something that could be limb or life-threatening, and you never know when someone needs to get in contact with you urgently. So you need to answer all pages as quickly as is possible. And obviously sometimes if you are in the middle of something, for example, you're in the middle of the OR, or you're in the middle of a procedure or whatever, you just can't answer that page immediately. But you need to try to make an effort to do so as quickly as possible because, as I said, you never know when it's something important. And generally speaking, for most things in the hospital, if you're being paged, it's probably important. So you should answer whenever you can.
Attendings hog them, sleep when you can, where you can, which brings me to rule number 3. If I'm sleeping, don't wake me unless your patient is actually dying.
Rule number 3, don't wake the chief resident unless someone is dying. Yeah, that's more or less pretty true. And they don't really have to be dying, but they should be pretty sick or it should be pretty important. The chief resident is assuming that you as the intern or you as the junior resident have everything under control. And if it's not under control, you shouldn't have let it get to this point where it was not under control in the first place. And it's true that they are resting to make sure that they are well prepared for whatever surgery they have to do on the next day because their attending physician is expecting them to take the lead, or they are studying for whatever exam they have to be doing as a senior resident to prepare for their licensing exam or their fellowship exam or whatever. So they need to be well rested. Their sleep is almost more important than your own. And as a junior resident, you want to make sure that you have everything covered so that they can sleep as much as is possible. And also you want to be able to demonstrate that you are able to work independently and make important critical decisions appropriately without close supervision at all times. I can recall my very first day of residency showing up. I was a resident on the orthopedic service, and one of the first things that the chief resident or my senior resident said to me at that time was, I got ORs to be preparing for and exams to study for. So don't wake me up unless it's a dire emergency and you can't get it done yourself. Otherwise, figure it out.
Rule number 4, the dying patient better not be dead when I get there. Not only will you have killed someone, you would have woke me for no good reason. We clear?
Number 4, don't allow the patient to die on your watch. This is true. And you don't want the patient to ever die, but if the patient is gonna die, you specifically don't want them to die while you are looking after them. Having said all of that, we are in the field of medicine. And more than likely, somebody is going to die when you are involved with their care. If you are working around sick people all the time, then odds are, if you work around enough sick people, you're probably gonna work around somebody who is close to dying or who will die. Yes, it does happen, but no, you don't want it to happen when you're looking after them.
Rule number 5, when I move, you move.
When I move, you move. Just like that. When I move, you move. Just like that.
And number 5, move when I move. This is definitely true. If you are on a service or on a particular team and your senior, whether that's the resident or the attending, when they are excited and moving with speed, that means you should be moving with speed because they recognize that there is something that is imminently dangerous and it requires immediate action. And if you do not move at the same pace, that's a problem. Generally in medicine, we like to work efficiently and calmly. And we tend to be very methodical about the things that we do. We usually will work through algorithms in a stepwise fashion. We try not to rush too much because then mistakes and accidents can occur. There are times, however, when the situation is so dire or the problem at hand is so pressing that we have to throw that all out the window and we have to move or act at a frenzied pace. When your staff does so, that means you should also be doing so because something is about to hit the fan. So let's move on to the next one. So here we have the intern, and as always, interns or the junior residents want to perform procedures.
Every year, the attending on call picks the best intern and lets them perform a procedure during the first shift.
Because that's what we want to do. We got into surgery because we like to operate, so we want to perform a procedure. So she's speaking to the chief resident about this.
I'm just saying it's what I heard.
Go away. No.
Each team is made up of a number of different personnel and they are organized in a hierarchy. So at the very top of the rung, you have the attending physician. Then after that, you have his or her fellow. Then you have the senior resident, the junior resident, and the medical students. And junior residents also includes the interns. And so everybody wants to do something. And when you're on a surgical service, everybody wants to gain surgical knowledge and they want to develop their surgical skills. So everybody wants to do a procedure. We have a saying in medicine,
shit always rolls downhill.
and basically what that means is that all of the scut work is gonna kind of be rolled down to the bottom to save all of the good stuff for the people up at the top. When you think about it, it kind of makes sense because the people who have the most responsibility are the people who need to be working at the skills most frequently. Obviously, the junior resident, the intern, and the medical students, they also need to develop their skills. But their opportunity to do so is going to be much less frequent than it will be for the senior resident and the fellow. Normally, the opportunity to perform a procedure is something that is earned after a resident has adequately demonstrated a particular level of knowledge, a certain level of skills, and a particular level of trust in the operating room. So in this scene, it looks like we have the attending physician. I don't know what his name is. Dr. Dreamy, Dr. McSteamy, I don't know. If you know what his name is, be sure to let me know in the comments. But, you know, Patrick Dempsey, that guy. So we have the attending, and he is chatting up one of the interns on the team, on his own team.
Dr. Shepard? Dr. Shepard? This morning it was Derek. Now it's Dr. Shepard.
I am not going to pretend for a second that this kind of thing does not happen.
Dr. Shepard, we should pretend it never happened.
What never happened? You sleeping with me last night? Or are you throwing me out this morning?
There are a few things that I have to say about this. First of all, this is shady business. And this is definitely, most definitely not encouraged in an academic setting. There are significant repercussions for this type of behavior, particularly if the resident or the intern is somebody that is on your own service. If you were attending physician and then you were attracted to a resident physician who was on some other service, so you're on general surgery, you're a general surgeon, and then you're attracted to somebody who's on obstetrics and gynae, that's already frowned upon. But it is even worse if they are on your own service. In other words, they are a resident under you and you are responsible for their education.
This can't exist. You get that, right?
That is a definite no-no.
You're an attending, and I'm your intern.
No.
Stop looking at me like that.
Like what?
No.
Like you've seen me naked.
No. That's bad. Don't do that. And obviously, if they're on your service, this raises the major question of your ability to act objectively when it comes to their assessment as a physician. And you would never want to get into a situation where, because you were in a romantic relationship with somebody who was your junior, that you passed that person when they were not clinically prepared to provide adequate care to a patient. This is a definite no-no. There are problems with this. There are rules that strictly prohibit this type of behavior. Oh boy, no, don't do that. Okay, so for this next scene, it looks like we have a resident or an intern who's about to perform a procedure with his staff person in the operating room, and above that operating room, they have a viewing gallery so that the other residents or the other staff or any interested medical personnel can watch as they perform the surgery.
He's gonna faint. He's a fainter.
Nah, code brown, right in his pants.
He's all about the flop sweat. He's gonna sweat himself on sterile.
So during my medical training, as a medical student, resident, and a fellow, I have worked at approximately 8 or 9 different hospitals, teaching hospitals in 2 different cities. And over and above that, I have actually worked in probably upwards of 20 different hospitals after I've done my training as both a locum and as a staff physician. I can honestly say that in all of those hospitals, I've never seen a viewing gallery. Never.
$10 says he messes up the McBurney.
50 says he cries.
I'll put 20 on a total meltdown.
50 says he pulls the whole thing off.
Never seen one. And maybe they exist. If you know a hospital where they exist, then let me know. But in the Canadian system, I have never seen this. Never seen a viewing gallery.
Raynor, stop it.
So usually if we're trying to observe a surgery and we are not directly scrubbed in to the surgery, then we would be in the operating theater around the periphery of the room, watching the procedure from a slight distance. You'd be closer than you would be in a gallery, but farther than being directly at the bedside with the surgeon or his assistants. The other thing that's interesting about this scene is the banter back and forth between the different interns and residents. And this type of banter does kind of happen. You might have 1 or 2 residents saying these things back and forth to each other as they're walking down the hall, to and from the OR or to and from rounds or something like that. The only time you're going to have the residents together like that is either once a week when they have their academic teaching rounds, during rounds in the morning when you have sign-over rounds, or the initial morning rounds when you go see your patients before the clinical day starts, or sign-over rounds at the end of the day. Unless it's specifically arranged as a teaching opportunity, that generally doesn't happen. There's way too much work in the hospital to get done to have all these physicians sitting around doing nothing but chit-chatting about what's going to happen in the OR. Doesn't happen.
75 says he can't even ID the appendix.
I'll take that action.
Okay, so for this next scene, we have one of the residents kind of standing in the hall, and she's debating about whether or not she's going to approach the chief resident, and it appears that one of the nurses is talking to her about this, to figure out what needs to be done. And so this intern, she needs to put in a central line, and as she is standing in the hall, she's debating, am I going to wake up the chief resident? Because if you recall, that was rule number 3, don't wake me up unless the patient is dying. So she's trying to decide whether she needs to do that. Ultimately, she decides that yes, this patient requires a central line. She does not know how to do a central line, so she's gonna have to wake the resident.
Mr. Jones has chunky veins and he really needs antibiotics. I should start a central line.
So start one. You don't know how.
I've never done one.
So obviously, as an intern, you may have some sort of deliberation like this before you wake the resident, because you do not want to catch a whole crap ton of hate once you wake the resident. So you gotta kind of make sure that this is the right decision, and you may have to stop and think about that for a moment before you wake them.
Well, you know what that means.
Can't we just page someone else?
She's the on-call resident.
But ultimately, if it's for something that the patient requires and you're unable to perform that, you need to take this higher up the chain of command, and that means that you need to wake your senior.
Dr. Bailey, I don't mean to bother you, but...
Then don't.
It's Mr. Jones.
Is he dying?
No.
Then stop talking to me.
Now, interestingly here, that we have the senior who's laying on a stretcher in the middle of the hall. And, you know, maybe that kind of stuff happens. If that's happened in your hospital, then let me know. But usually that doesn't happen. Typically we have a call room, okay, or a series of call rooms. And so those are rooms which are basically small sleeping rooms which are away from a clinical area, so that there is some quiet where you are not going to be necessarily bothered by the nurses, bothered by patients, bothered by the noise, general hustle and bustle of the hospital, and where you can get some sleep. So typically the senior resident would be in the call room, and they wouldn't really be laying on a stretcher in the middle of the hall. And even when things are crazy in the hospital, typically we're not going to do that. We might, if we couldn't get to the call room, we might go to a very quiet corner of the nurses' station, and we would sleep in a chair or something like that. Most often, you are not going to be sleeping in the middle of the hallway where patients are walking by. Anybody can talk to you, anybody can touch you, anybody can do whatever, and yeah, you're just not gonna be in that situation. The sleep that you would get there is crappy anyway. One of the other things though I think that is interesting is that you can see here that the resident is sleeping in such a way that she has the pager right by her head. And this is because you do not want to miss a page. You do not want to miss a page. And trust me, after you work several months of basically staying up for 36 hours in a row every 3 days, you become to be really tired. And you become to be a really sound sleeper. Meaning that usually when the pager goes off, you may not hear it. And that doesn't matter whether you put it on vibrate or you put it at the loudest volume. So you quickly become accustomed to sleeping with the pager in your hand directly by your head. So that when the pager goes off, you can hear it. It will rouse you from your slumber. So this position, although sleeping in the middle of the hallway is not something that I ever really had to do. Sleeping with the pager right beside my head, that is accurate. We did that all the time, and I know I did that, and I know there was more than one resident, more than one of my colleagues who did the same. So that's accurate.
What is it?
Next time you wake me, you better be so close to dead there's a tag on his toe.
The last thing I want to say about this is, as a resident, there are a few rules that you need to do to survive. So the resident rules were: eat when you can, sleep when you can, and have sex when you can. Because if you don't follow those rules, you never know when you'll have an opportunity to do those things. For my first 3 years, I was up 36 hours in a row every 3 days. You take sleep whenever you can get it in order to keep yourself recharged. And have sex whenever you can was basically synonymous for, if you have a wife or a significant other or a husband or a significant other, whatever, spend time with that person whenever you can. Because if you don't, your relationship is gonna go down the tubes because you spend most of your time in the hospital. So those were the resident rules that we lived by. You know what? This video's taking way too freaking long. That's it, I'm cutting it. Calling it a day. Stay tuned for part 2, coming later this week. So if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. If you like the video, be sure to give it a big thumbs up and share it with somebody you know. And as always, that's been a word from Dr. Chris, not your everyday